If you're prospecting, then you probably have a list of stale leads. It's just sitting there. The fact is, stale leads can be an absolute goldmine for prospecting if it's done correctly. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 things that you can incorporate into your approach for stale leads that will make it much more effective, whether it's in your messaging or on the phone with prospects. I'm sure you can think of a time when someone said or did something that was the total opposite of what you were expecting. The first thing that we want to do here with this approach is demonstrate the polar opposite of what the prospect is likely to find predictable. For example, a stale lead may likely expect to be asked about the prior discussion and what happened there. So if our approach is to not follow up, then what do we make it about? Well, that's the second thing we need to come up with, and it needs to be something specific and mutually relevant. An example of something specific might be an upcoming industry mandate or regulation that's relevant to your prospect and that your company knows something about. It could also be an acquisition your company made that enhances your product offering, or an industry event that occurred which there's a knowledge gap around. So spend the time brainstorming what you can use for this, the second part, and believe me, it's well worth doing. Now that we have the drastic contrast and a specific reason for the prospect to engage with us, it's time for the third and final component, the hook. A hook in this context is an additional reason for the prospect to engage with the call to action. To come up with your hook, think of an observation about your prospect that makes what you're reaching out to them about relevant. Let's take a look at how this ties together on a cold call. This is an older example, but it's a real one, and it's used by PhoneBurner to revive stale leads that had previously used their power dialer on a free trial. The persona in this example is a sales leader that has a team making cold calls in the US. And remember, this approach needs to focus on something different than just the typical and predictable follow-up, okay? So see if you can identify where we use drastic contrast and a hook to accomplish this. So here goes.
Hello?
Hi, is this Andrew?
Yes.
Andrew, hi, this is Greg Woodward. I'm with the partnerships team at PhoneBurner. You may recall our power dialer for sales teams. I'm just calling with a question. Do you have a minute?
Sure.
Okay. Andrew, I see that you had a free trial on our platform a while back, and we can talk about that if you'd like to. But the reason I'm calling, I wanted to see if you were familiar with the outbound calling regulation in the US called Stir Shaken.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Yeah, look, many of our customers have sort of been asking us about this and what it means from a compliance standpoint. But if I could ask, is it mainly the US that your team is making calls in?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure where things ended up after our free trial, but what I can do, since you're making calls primarily in the US, is set up a time for us to reconnect and bring you up to speed on Stir Shaken, because it does only impact teams in the US making calls. And I can also share with you some measures that we've taken with our existing customers to help them with compliance. Would that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds nice.
Notice how instead of a typical follow-up, we made this call about something else? In this case, the FCC mandate was directly relevant to sales teams making calls in the US, and because the list we're using is composed of stale leads that had a free trial in the past, they're making calls in the US. But rather than stating it directly at them, we posed it in question form. Posing it in question form enabled us to position their answer as an additional reason for our call to action. You see how I did that?